No thief, deceive, naive, without trust, no greed, mislead, or lead without us. No thief, deceive, naive, without trust, no greed, mislead, or lead without us. No thief, deceive, naive, without trust, no greed, mislead, or lead without us. No thief, deceive, naive, without trust, no greed, mislead, or lead without us. A derelict, a bottle, take a cookie, take a sucker, willy, nip, take a straw, house, take a break, a hop, make a shake, animals like us. No more share, human talents, is a woman, so the super, super right, so all about to fire, everybody keep it quiet, animals like us. I put your business in the piece of mother heart, and you don't take the better to the pretty decent, green cover, green trees, and green water, green season, we don't need an operation, we don't even need a reason, need a human appetite, and little monitor, the beast that you get this, and you never say they're animals, and people just assuming that you're human, every scene and every meaning, every man and every woman, every animals are living, just assuming that you're human. Can we all get in this together? 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 Pretty Americana, Renaissance, Helium, Homie, Oriental, Golden Eye, Turning Farrakhan, Willow Valley, make you all animals like us. Jimmy Crow, nothing body war, location authority, Muslim minority, California versus all animals like us. So see how you feel, so safe in your skin. When it reach you, you should go. Say they're animals and people just as much as you. Before your needs, you just as much as you. Can we all get in this together? 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 A derelict, a bottle, take a cookie, dingy, dicky, stick a willy, nip, stick a put a lick a dilly, take a little break, stick it to the animals like us. Cranium, Americana, Renaissance, Helium, Homie, Oriental, Golden Eye, Turning Farrakhan, Willow Valley, paranoia, animals like us. No thief, deceive, naive, without trust, no greed, mislead, or lead without us. No thief, deceive, naive, without trust, no greed, mislead, or lead without us. No thief, deceive, naive, without trust, no greed, mislead, or lead without us. No thief, deceive, naive, without trust, no greed, mislead, or lead without us.
Hey, welcome to Rominger Radio. This is Carl, your host, 717-916-5189. If you want to get in on the talk line early here. Looking for some first-time callers. Of course, repeat callers are always welcome as well. Just trying to encourage you, if you can, trying to get the courage and you haven't called before, go ahead and dial 717-916-5189. We'll get you on the air. Got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about tonight. Interesting stuff going on around the country. St. Louis suburb continues to be torn apart with looting and rampaging and a show of force by the government. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I wasn't too pleased with what's going on there when I talked on Wednesday night. I'll kind of update you on some of my thoughts. You may know from some of the Facebook posts that we've done as well, kind of where I'm at on some of that. But I'm also interested in Governor Rick Perry in Texas. He's been indicted on allegations that he exercised a veto in a criminal manner. It's a very fascinating case because the basic allegation is that he vetoed financing and or attempted to coerce a public official in their job. And the setup on that is kind of interesting. I posted an article on Facebook that you should take a look at from the Washington, I think, Post or Times. Boy, that's a big difference, I know. But basically, there was a woman who was a prosecutor who got a DUI. and Perry wanted her to step down. And he made it very vocal, and apparently maybe even behind the scenes did some things to try to get her to step down. He said he lost confidence in the prosecutor because of her DUI, and she got 45 days in jail. Apparently there was not a very pleasant tape of her at the booking center. Of course, she was drunk, so she was acting it. So he thought she should step down and lost confidence in her. But there was a little rub. She wasn't a regular prosecutor. Besides being the Travis County prosecutor, apparently, she ran the public integrity unit for the state. And when she refused to step down, Perry said, well, okay, then I'm going to veto the financing so you effectively don't have a unit anymore. And through the back scenes, he was trying to get her to step down and negotiate, but basically then just use his line item veto power to just strike the ethics public integrity unit entirely. And it was a statewide prosecutorial matter. It was not a local county. It was county prosecutor's office, but they were running this for the state. But here's the rub. At the time, she was actively investigating some kind of company involved with cancer or some such thing, which turns out to be a major political donor of Perry's. And it appears that had she stepped down, he could appoint the successor automatically. If she refused to step down, then she continues to run all the investigations, including the one of his friend and major donor. So the argument that you're going to see brought forward, and this is why I think it's very interesting, is that he was being opportunistic. In other words, yes, she got a DUI. Yes, she did a bad thing. But he was trying to force her out to kill this investigation. And when he couldn't do that, he simply dried up their funding so they couldn't go forward with the investigation of his political supporter. And there's a Dallas Morning Times article that gives some more details. I think is linked from the Washington article that I posted on Facebook about that political donations that Perry got. So the question would be, let's look at this two different ways. One is, could, and of course, if you want to get in on the discussion, it's 717-916-5189. So if you would like to get in on the discussion, 717-916-5189. Let's look at this from two different angles. If Perry simply exercised his veto because he felt she should step down, she refused, and that's the only reason he did it, that's his intent, correct? Then, easy. Not guilty, not a crime, just did what he's politically allowed to do. This is sort of like when the federal government, and keep in mind, because I've seen some people already go, well, Obama's after Perry. These are state matters. This is all internal to Texas. There's no federal prosecutors involved. In fact, the fellow who was appointed by a conservative Republican judge as the independent counsel in this matter was a U.S. attorney previously, now is a private criminal defense lawyer. There's no indications that he has any particularly strong political leanings. But let's talk about this for a second. So if he just exercised his power of veto for no other reason than he could, and he felt she had a DUI and she should step down, there's no prosecution possible. Now, it's possible it's naked politics, but you still would want something to hang your hat on. So here's where the problem would come in. Remember Bridgegate with New Jersey? You know, if the governor didn't know what his underlings were doing, then there's really no problem there. The governor just really didn't do anything wrong. If, on the other hand, it was the governor's idea or somebody suggested to him and he okayed it, it's different. What if somewhere along the line Perry had a communication? Maybe somebody says, yes, I was a witness. Governor Perry told her directly or told me to tell her directly, you know, here's what we're willing to do or we'll take care of you. I just need you to resign. And maybe he told somebody else that the reason he wanted her to resign was because he was trying to make sure that he ended the investigation of his big campaign donor. So let's look at it that way. If, in fact, there's evidence that he influenced the investigation or shut off the money to protect somebody he was connected to and benefited from, then that would be an abuse of his power and possibly the criminal abuse of his power. Now, here's where the whole thing gets crazy. This is one of these cases that highlights the difference between what's legal and what's illegal, and quite often what's legal is still terrible. So politicians have the power to take care of their constituency and their benefactors and their major donors, right? And so what do? Well, if he acts in a way that helps a major donor, that in and of itself, without a quid pro quo, is usually not enough to prove the case, because the quid pro quo becomes the proof. Otherwise, it's just politics as the defense. That's the defense Perry's running. Now, David Axelrod, none less than a very famous Democrat, came out and said he thought the case was pretty thin if that's all they have. And if you pay careful attention to what the Democrats keep saying, if that's all they have, if it's just that he vetoed it, then it's a bad prosecution. That's maybe very clever by the national Democrats to come out and say this, because this way it doesn't look like they're piling on Perry, but they're leaving open that there could be more. And they probably know what I know, or their advisors know, which is I doubt the prosecutor would have brought the prosecution if he didn't think he could prove it, or at least didn't think he had a little more to hang on than a raw veto. 717-916-5189 to get in on the conversation here tonight. Why do I think Kay Bailey Hutchinson years ago was prosecuted by the same office and the jury acquitted her. But when I was in law school, I remember we talked about that case. The prosecutors wanted to put a bunch of documents into evidence, basically the contents of a file cabinet that showed she'd been doing campaigning from her office. She was a state. She held office in the state when she was running for senator or whatever, and the allegation was much like Bonusgate here in Pennsylvania, that they were running the campaign with official money, and they were using staff, etc., to run her next campaign out of her current state office. And there was a ruling by the trial judge that none of the documents would be admissible, and the prosecutor said, well, I don't have any more evidence to present, so I have to rest. And, of course, they rested with no evidence of any wrongdoing because the judge excluded it all. Of course, it turns out the judge retired right after that, was a dyed-in-the-wool Republican. So Texas politics are pretty famous for this. So some people will point at that and say, well, Travis County, prosecuted her and they had nothing against her. If you go back and actually study that, they had quite a bit of material against her, but the judge kept it out of court. And see, once a jury's sworn, remember this one, kids, ready? Once a jury's sworn in, jeopardy attaches, and if the judge simply rules that some documents are not admissible, prosecutors never get to appeal. If the judge lets documents in and a guy gets convicted, or a girl in that case gets convicted, they can appeal. They can appeal to an appellate court and maybe get a new trial. We do not allow the appeal of acquittals in the United States. Britain, in fact, has recently experimented with this so that you could twice be in jeopardy. But because of double jeopardy, we have said that if the prosecution doesn't prove their case the first time and the jury acquits, they can never bring that case back again. It's called double jeopardy, even if they have better evidence. So if a judge simply says, I, as the judge, am not allowing you to put in the murder weapon, and I'm not letting you put in the eyewitness's testimony, and the prosecutor is unable to go forward, they lose the case. Now, there's a couple workarounds they can do on that, but none of them are very good. Caller, you're on the air.
Carl, the Perry topic is definitely a good topic tonight. But I think you're right about the fact that the prosecution would not bring the case unless they knew there was more to the argument than simply the veto.
Yeah, they have to have somebody going. And apparently there was a lot of backdoor contact going on with this woman, with them repeatedly sending people to her saying, well, if you do this, we'll do that. If you'll step down, we'll do this. Please, we'll refund the unit if you step down. And so the veto, and then the promise to undo the veto put together with the coercion on her, might be where they're going to hang the hat. In other words, if he was going to veto it, he should have just vetoed it. But if he vetoes it and then goes to her and says, okay, well, I'll unveto it or make sure it gets funded if you step down, that may sound like pressure. Now, he's going to say it's because she got a DUI. That's what he's going to say, right?
Right. No, so I think that's incidental. She's probably crazy and drunk, but he obviously played that to his advantage, hoping to crush the investigation.
It actually goes back to David Axelrod saying,
his operations into politics.
Remember, David Axelrod said no good crisis should go. I think his idea was, he should take advantage of any good crisis. I forget the exact quote. So it's funny that he's come out and said it, because that's what Perry probably did. Perry wanted to get rid of this woman from this commission. Got a duck in there, my friend. Saw the opportunity to do it and did it. Unfortunately, he may have been too talky. So I'll be curious to see what we eventually learn from this.
Well, I think the case will reveal itself as it unfolds, but Texas will not spend the money. The prosecutor will not come forward unless they absolutely have some kind of substantial evidence of something going on outside of a simple veto action.
Now, on the other hand, in Rick Perry's defense, I used to tell clients sometimes, listen, if you think you've been framed, it's probably not true. If you think that it's a blatantly false prosecution, it's probably not true, unless you're a senator or a major politician, because then it's always possible to have charges thrown at you for pure politics. So I will say it is possible that there is naked politics here, but here's the problem with that. The independent prosecutor in this case who was brought in was a professional prosecutor for years in the U.S. Attorney's Office. He was under the control of a conservative Republican judge who appointed him and was empowering him. So it doesn't smell like naked politics. It doesn't smell like naked politics.
No, and it seems like if they want to keep a rupture in the party down, then they want to prosecute this guy right away.
Plus, I want to go
and expose him.
Yeah, exactly. And let's go one step farther. While Rick Perry was saying he was going to run for president again, do any of us think he's any more viable than Sarah Palin at this point? He had foot and mouth disease pretty terribly during the last election.
Well, he's absolutely not a viable candidate for president. Nobody trusts him or knows him or cares about him. So to say that Perry's being taken down, like this is some big conspiracy to make sure he's not the next president. Well, you know what? If it is, I want to thank those people. No, that's a weak argument because he's not a threat to anything.
So that again lends credence to the idea that there may actually be something to this. But only time will tell. We can speculate, which is what we do here on Roger Radio.
That's true.
We'll speculate all day, every day, all day. And heck, it's fun. But on the other hand, I'm willing to guess there's going to be some more key facts that will come out. Sort of like Bridgegate. I liked Chris Christie, but now one of his staffers has turned on him, and starting to look like he knew what was really going on, when it was going on. And
Christie probably oversaw that operation and probably pushed it along a little bit. But
Christie's problem isn't that he did that. Christie's problem is that he came out in the press conference and categorically denied any knowledge.
I don't know if he was trying to save his face in the community, but he obviously ruined his chances for running for any kind of national office.
You're better off when you're a politician and one of these scandals breaks to A, say nothing, which of course is tough for them to do, and B, the press doesn't let them, or just come out and be a little more honest about it, and say, you know what, I'm going to address this. It's a serious issue. I'm going to address this when it's appropriate. I'm happy to answer questions for anybody who has questions. And of course, the question will be, did you know? And he may need to say, I did at some point learn that this had happened. Just leave it alone. Leave it nebulous. It's exactly when, if it's really damning. And if it wasn't really damning, if you did learn about it, but you didn't discipline anybody, then you can at least explain it and say, hey, you know what, I did learn about it subsequent. And you know what, you're right. I should have disciplined and fired these people already, and I didn't, and I will. That's my thought on the matter, but I don't know. So Perry's problem now is I think he was making a full court press on this girl, and he wanted her out. And unfortunately for him, there's some connection to this investigation that she was running, which ties it back to him. So it's enough to thread the needle here to at least get into court. And a grand jury did indict her. Now, of course, I've said this before. Let's talk about grand juries. Any prosecutor can get any grand jury to indict anybody. It's not really a fair process. So I guess that's not really important that it was a grand jury. All right,
yes, good points, Carl.
All right, my friend, I'm going to let you go.
All right, thank you very much, Carl.
Right, take care. We're going to talk a little bit about Ferguson now. What's going on in Ferguson? Well, I don't know. Some kid got shot. Sounds like he robbed someplace, allegedly. for some cigars or cigarettes in a, quote, strong arm robbery. Not an armed robbery, a strong armed robbery. Now, my buddy Richard on Facebook, who was all going all crazy because he's like, see, Carl, see, he was a robber, and now it justifies why the police shot. Well, then, of course, they find out, well, actually, his involvement in the robbery wasn't under investigation by the officer who shot him, and he was unaware of the robbery, actually, and had no knowledge of it. So the robbery itself, even if it was committed by this kid, had nothing to do with the police interaction. Now, I'll be fair to the police and suggest, however, if he just robbed a place and he's having police interaction, he may been more nervous than necessary and acted out wrongly. So that's a possibility, and I'm willing to entertain that. On the other hand, I think Ferguson is exposing a couple dividing lines again. Race. The police force is 99%. There's 3 blacks and 38 whites or something on the police force in a town that's like 80% plus percent black. It's the us versus them mentality that these situations create. There's a history in that area of segregation. There's a history of those things in St. Louis and the surrounding suburbs. But there's a bigger issue going on, and it's the government removing itself from policing and turning it into military operations. There's a great quote by one of the guys who served in Afghanistan, because I put a picture on Facebook of a sniper looking at the crowd with his gun engaged on the crowd. I mean, he's up there in a sniper's nest with his gun engaged on the crowd, looking at people in his sniper scope. Now, you couldn't do that in Afghanistan. The rules of engagement didn't simply allow you to point the sniper scope at a crowd and just start looking around with your scope and see what's going on. But, hey, the police are doing it. So military people with a lot of training and rules of engagement wouldn't necessarily simply allow that to happen. Some people would go, well, he's a trained, I don't know if he's trained or not. I don't know what that guy's background is. And more importantly, even professional, well-trained people don't just look down their scope. In fact, last I checked, and in case any of you yahoos ever took the hunter safety course, what are you not supposed to use your scope for? Raise your hand if you answered to look at other hunters or people as they walk through the woods. Because whether you believe it or not, the scope, if the gun is properly sighted in, when you look through the scope at a person, you are also aiming the gun at that person. So what are you supposed to use if you want to look at another target besides something you intend and should shoot? It's called binoculars. Binoculars. It's not a really complicated thing. Or a monocular. That's like a binocular, but only for one eye. So that's the word mon, like mono. Mono, you know. So anyhow, even from the basic 12-year-old hunter safety course, we would know you're not supposed to be looking down your sniper scope at the crowd. Now, if it's an active engagement, and again, this was not he was looking at looters. This was the people are in the town square, and this guy is in his crow's nest with his sniper scope looking at people. It's abhorrent to anybody who knows anything about anything. So if it's not abhorrent to you, you must know nothing about nothing. The military, in their little program called From War Fighter to Crime Fighter, has armed local police departments with a couple $2 billion worth of military gear. Our police have turned into a paramilitary unit. Our police have become increasingly militarized. In the United States of America, we have something called posse comitatus. We're not supposed to have a military running around our nation. There's not supposed to be a military in the United States. Richard, anyone else who's listening, 717-916-5189 if you want to tell me why there should be military. I'm sure some of you think, oh, any towelhead, they should have armed troops at the airport and they should search all people who appear to be Islamic or Muslim. I know some of you think that way. And I only bring that up to point out that, no, No, we're not a militarized society. We're not supposed to be. The king had an army, and the king used the army to oppress the... Raise your hand if you said people. Okay, good. I see 3 of you. 717-916-5189 if you think I'm wrong, or if you think I'm right. I always take a, yeah, you're right, Carl. That's always good. I'll take that call, too. Anyhow, if you see where I'm going with this, I just want to point this out. In all sincerity, we should not be supporting armed interaction, armed intervention on American soil by paramilitary units. We don't need all these SWAT teams. We don't need armored vehicles. We don't need police officers in snipers' nests to protect us from these supposed terrorists that are just cropping out anywhere and everywhere. And it exacerbates it. In fact, police and military experts have come on and said, when you put on a face mask, when you raise the shield, when you put the officer into body armor, you remove the humanity from them. And when people look at them, they don't see them as a policing agent, see us as us against them. Overlay that with a community who already feels like the police are us against them. And I know what you racists would say. Say it. It doesn't matter. It is a fact. You shouldn't have an all-white police force policing an all-black community. It just doesn't make sense. Because it just plays into what used to happen. And what occasionally still does happen. So it's a problem because he's got these things reinforcing. Now, as for the looters, the guy in the crow's nest, he can engage the looters. Why don't we go ahead and say, shoot on sight. Looters will be shot on sight. Okay, let's try it. See how that turns out. See if that doesn't escalate the situation a little bit. This thing was handled terribly from the beginning. I mean, just absolutely terribly from the beginning. And then the police chief comes out and does this snarky little trick where he announces who the police officer was and then releases the videotape of the guy who was shot, saying that he's a suspect in a strong-arm robbery. Of course, leaves out the little detail, which when asked later, oh, yeah, that's right. Well, actually, the officer did know nothing about that. But I just thought I released the 2 tidbits together at the same time, perhaps to try to create a false impression. No, he didn't say that part. I just added that. By the way, the other interesting thing that had to happen is the police, the Ferguson police and the county police and the state police had to be forced to sign a document because they were being sued. So they signed a document acknowledging that they would not arrest people for taking cell phone video of what was going on. They were actually arresting people, confiscating cell phones of citizens who were not participating in the looting, were not participating in the riots, but simply recording it and documenting police action in those events and arresting them. They also arrested some journalists. But now they've signed a document remembering about the First Amendment and remembering that citizens are free to otherwise record the police, suddenly remembering after a judge was going to hold a hearing on it. They all signed off on it, and they said, we'll stop arresting people who are taking pictures and cell phone videos. Thank God for cell phone videos. It's going to solve a lot of our problems. We can see what's going on in real time. We can discern it for ourselves. So, anyhow, Ferguson, big mess. Not getting better anytime soon. Militarization of America's police. Been going on under our noses without our consent or our permission. I'm sure some of you wackies think that that's just the spiffiest thing in the world, that every police force should be ready to fight terrorists. Well, you know what? You can give all the spiffy weapons you want to the police. It's not going to help us fight terror, per se. Careful training would go a lot farther. And police officers who have to literally serve in a war zone or in an area where they're going in to do a drug raid. You know, I understand the Kevlar armor, et cetera, et cetera. But police officers don't deserve any more respect or any less respect than any other profession. It's statistically more dangerous to be a farmer. You're more likely to die as a farmer than you are as a police officer, okay? So don't give me this crap that their jobs are more dangerous than anybody else's. I think there's a few other professions as well. well, actually, I think there's quite a few where statistically you're more likely to die or be seriously injured than a police officer, which don't involve policing at all. Involve normal professions. And why do I say that? Well, because for some reason we always hear this argument, officer safety, it's such a dangerous job, Well, good, then farmers should be allowed to have automatic weapons and body armor and whatever the hell else they want, because they have the most dangerous job. Yeah, that's right, farmers. Those hay combines, and those weed thrashers and those dipped over tractors are pretty darn dangerous. I'm not sure what body armor and guns are going to do about them, but it's still the most dangerous job, and I think farmers deserve the recognition. Caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, is this Carl?
This is Carl.
Carl, this is Andy Berger calling. Finally get to talk to you.
How you doing, my friend?
Good. Are you still talking about the Spanish food?
We're not actually talking about Spanish food, but you're referring to what I posted on Facebook, which was an article from the Onion about a guy who was all upset because he went to the grocery store and discovered an entire aisle of Spanish food. And then when he was walking out all upset, he then noticed that they even had hummus there as well. Yeah.
I love Spanish Mexican food.
I actually ate chorizo sausage myself this evening. So,
what is your topic tonight?
We've been talking about Governor Perry. We've been talking about Ferguson, Mississippi, and the militarization of police. What do you want to talk about, my friend?
Well, I would talk about Ferguson. First of all,
what do you think?
Ms. Bree, we have to get these African American kids educated better. But here's the whole thing. There was a Michelle Rhee who was Oriental down in Washington, D.C. She took over. She fired some teachers, and these kids were starting to get educated. And who comes in and stops it? Barack Obama. And she's out, and the people voted her out. Now, if they want to get their kids educated, they got to get them educated. Because they don't have the fair chance, but the fair chance is because of their parents and the people like Jackson and Sharpton, And there's good, wonderful black people. I grew up with black people in Steelman. There's just wonderful people, but their leadership, I swear they're descended from the slave traders,
So,
but Ferguson, I don't know what to say. Well, that's horrible.
And I think part of the problem in Ferguson has been because there's no excuse for the looting. There's really no excuse for the looting. On the other hand, there's no excuse for tear gassing the demonstrators who are simply, on march, etc. One of my concerns is there's an increasing militarization of the police here in America. And the Pentagon, quietly over the last 10 years, has transferred $4 billion worth of warfighting apparatus to local police departments. I mean, what do they need? What do they really need that stuff for?
They don't.
Right, and so if Ferguson calls anything to our attention, it might be A, that looters are opportunistic and we need to do more about the looters, but B, that the police forces are getting scarier and scarier as well. And the way they handled the shooting of this kid was just terrible right off the bat, refusing to release the officer's name and then going ahead and saying he was suspect in a robbery. At the same time, he released the officer's name, but leave out the part that it turns out that officer had no knowledge of that. So that whole incident. Right. So the whole thing's just been bungled around and around. Now, the governor down there is taking a strong stance and saying, okay, I'm putting down a curfew. And I think that's the right thing to do. Declare a state of emergency and put down a curfew. On the other hand, if the protesters want to come out and protest, but here's the thing: if that cop did nothing wrong, because I don't know what really happened. I don't know what happened in that car. There was no cameras. No cameras. Once again, we got the police doing something, and magically there's no cameras. Well, guess what? What the hell really happened? Well, if that guy needed to be shot for some reason, and that officer acted appropriately under the circumstances as he perceived him,
what if he put his hands up? What if that fella put his hands up and said, and started walking toward the cop?
I know, and I don't know what happened, and that's what I'm saying. I don't either. That poor cop if in fact he's innocent of anything, or even just
There's always someone inciting.
That guy.
Now, when I was in the Army.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
well, I was just good. That guy's in trouble,
when
man.
I was in the Army. Yeah. When I was in the Army, our platoon leader was a kid named Robert Alex, who is African American, and he was from Watts, and had to join the Army because he took participation in the Watts riot. He was our platoon leader. Most of his close friends there was us guys from Central Pennsylvania, white guys, and he told us, he said, the thing that got us riled up was a bunch of white men came in and told them to go riot and don't worry because we'll bail you out. You have nothing to worry about. Now it's black guys, it's Jackson and Sharpton, but there's always someone inciting.
Well, and when it comes to protesting and all those things, I mean, you get these. What was it? The UAW at some point was advertising. We'll pay you X dollars a day to go out and protest, and we'll serve you a hot lunch.
Yeah.
And they just go find people to. Inciting people for political ends is a time-honored strategy. And to credit, I think Jackson and Sharpton have both said not to loot. I mean, not that it needs to be said, but they've both said it. But there is a whole element in our society, like I say, that sits back and takes advantage of something. And I guarantee you, if the power grid goes out, if we get one of these big sunspots and it waxes our power grid, or the terrorists take down the power grid, or whatever happens, our biggest problem is going to be the fact that we're going to have 100 million looters, not a few in St. Louis.
Oh, I wanted to tell you one other thing while you're on the air, because I do a lot of research on the global warming.
Uh-huh.
And I just found out, well, of course, the warmest decade was in 1930s, the 4 warmest years. Now the government has turned around, I should say the United Nations, because that's who's behind this. And they're going to use a different way to measure the climate back then so that they can make the 1930s colder than the last decade.
Yeah, imagine that.
And the purpose is of global warming, and this is according to Otmar Edenhofer. He's the head of the science place at the UN called the IPCC, the inner whatever it is.
Right.
And he said people are misunderstanding this. This isn't just something about global warming. It's to redistribute the wealth among the nations. And what they're going to do is they're going to tax people their energy credits, and then somewhere like Africa, where there's no manufacturing at all, they're going to have to give money to China, because China didn't have cause any global warming from manufacturing. Of course, the Chinese said, "Good luck." They build a coal plant once a month, great big coal plants. They're burning coal like mad.
Yeah, and when it comes to burning coal, I was just down by Donner Island down there in New York with the coal-fired plant.
Right.
You don't realize, you can get right up close to those piles of coal and the rail cars. The scope of what it takes to run one of those, the amount of coal they burn, is just phenomenal.
Right.
On the other hand, people think, you can get some solar cells or some windmills and replace that. Well, you look at the output of one of those plants versus how many windmills or solar cells you need, and you start to realize that that's not going to replace it anytime soon.
That's right, and they don't kill any eagles.
That's right.
But here, our country, we worry about a snail darter, and then we go kill the national emblem of our country. 27 eagles last year were killed.
Yeah.
President Obama.
Yeah,
they're so full of it.
Well, and I can tell you, some of the environmental crimes that have been committed by people over the years are mainly by corporations, of course. And so it used to be, for instance, if you have some oil in a pit somewhere, let's say you've got some kind of industrial operation going on, and I'm trying to remember what company it was, but they had some oil, that was in some lagoons or ponds or something. Of course, ducks don't know the difference. Right. They land on it and die. So a flock of ducks lands on it, and they go ahead and cite them for an environmental crime because the ducks landed on it. Well,
yeah, it's a shame.
Well, they get fined and pay a lot of money.
Yeah. Hey, I have a question for the environmentalist and Mother Earth. What did she eat to get all that coal in her belly?
Everything she could find.
Well, I'll tell you, they got their Myber straighten your mom up.
Now, I'll tell you.
What about this? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to tell you, well, it's interesting because some of the coal we know comes from plant life from history because we can see the fossils.
I'm on the hold line.
Yeah, you're on the hold line. You don't have to tell us that. I've got a second caller holding in the background, but he should just shut up.
Okay. Well, maybe I better let you go.
All right. Well, anyhow, but I was just going to say, but we know the coal.
Take my call.
Yeah, and I'm going to. What I'm going to do? We'll meet for dinner some night, and
all right.
We'll talk because I got all kinds of stuff. I know it's.
All right, brother.
Annoying.
I'm ready.
Catch you later.
Thanks
for
man.
taking my call.
No problem.
Bye now.
All right, caller, you're on the air.
Hey, Carl, it's Jim.
You still there? You still there? I think I lost him.
Hello?
Hey, Don, how are you?
Hello, Carl. I can barely hear you.
Can you barely hear me?
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to my other caller. All right, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. How are you?
If I say that too many times, Verizon's going to want a chunk of the no money I make on this podcast.
I wanted to get in on the conversation about where coal comes from.
Yeah. Well, it comes from plant life that's been compressed at the bottom of the ocean, right?
Well, I wouldn't say necessarily the ocean, no.
But I mean lakes that fill in, and then it gets compressed into the sedimentary layers, and a billion years later it turns into coal.
Exactly. It's a natural process.
We know coal comes that way, but there's a big fight over where oil really comes from, because a lot of Western scientists believe oil's created in a similar nature. Plankton falls in the sea, and eventually the oil compresses and oil comes out of it, and this sort of thing.
That makes considering that plant life is ubiquitous on the planet. I mean, it's everywhere.
Right.
So it would likely occur anywhere. Any opportunity for fossilization would occur.
But the Russians believe that oil is created through other non-organic geological processes. And one of the things that they point at is these giant plumes of pure sodium chloride that are quite often accompany oil. And therefore, because you don't get ocean salt as pure sodium chloride in massive, formation. So anyhow, we'll never know where oil really comes from, but that's okay.
Well, I can tell you where it didn't come from.
Yeah, I can guess what you were going to say. By the way, I have another caller on. Second caller, are you there?
James Anders here.
Okay, James, good. You're here, and you're here live with Don Stevens.
I'll keep it cordial.
Yeah, you too. Don't fighting, kids.
I know, Xander, you're a big hater, you.
What I'm calling is really, first off, I don't have much insight on the Perry thing. I'm glad that you're talking about it with some of your background legal-wise, because I haven't heard anybody on anything lately really give any insight into it the way you did. So thanks.
Well, thank you.
But what I'm curious about is, yeah, I believe there's over-militarization. I agree that I don't like the fact that, the Pentagon's giving all these things because, like you said, I don't know the right term, but no standing army in our police force, post-comitatus or something you said.
Quasi-comitatus, yeah.
Thank you. I'm on board with that. But what I'm calling about is just curiosity. I mean, I've heard that there was alleged first witness, one of the witnesses that was coming on the crime scene and everything, a bystander like you or me, if we saw something like that horribly happen. And as he was recording things, on the backdrop, there was allegedly people talking to cops, and they were saying that the regretful victim had been rushing the cops or something. If you look at it, the alleged video or something with the audio, it's out there. So, time will tell, and I hope whoever deserves justice, good and bad, gets it. The
problem is that now now that the issue has been framed as an us against them, and justice must be served. If justice is that the police officer did nothing wrong, the community will not be satisfied. If it's the officer did something wrong, the community will be satisfied. So the politics of it are going to push this poor officer, if in fact he's innocent of any wrongdoing, into a position where everybody's going to make sure he's found of wrongdoing because this is the blood sacrifice. If that's the case. If on the other fact he's guilty, well, then he's just got a bunch of shit he's got to deal with.
Well, I mean, I think they even said that there was a report, I don't know if it was Washington Times or something. I posted a link on your thing for the show. Department of Justice didn't even want this video released, the one having in store and everything else, because, it might incite tensions and whatnot. I'm just for transparency no matter where it comes from.
The problem is what the Department of Justice, because the two things aren't really connected, I think they were basically saying you don't need to release the one to tell the story about the other. And probably looked at it as, don't do it yet. Down the road we can wait, but get the people off the street and get everybody calmed down and get the mob mentality back down. But it seems like this sheriff and his guys have not gone in any direction out of their way to avoid confrontation. So
I think the first one did it a little heavy-handed. I haven't had much time to look, with me and everything that's going on. But I think from what I've heard, heavy-handed, I agree. What I'm curious about, and maybe you can give some insight into all of us about this, if somebody were to come on my property and start trying to cause destruction to my home, my property, looting, intrusion, whatever, depending on the scenario, I might have the reason to be able to use force against them, okay, with a firearm.
Okay.
Hopefully, that never happens. Now, I've seen pictures, I've seen stories where store owners, you can see them on the web, they're out there standing in front of their stores, when they're looting and rioting is taking place and everything, with clear semi-rifles, other things, firearms, that sort. And, some of the allegations are, they avoided those areas because, possibly, you don't want an armed confrontation with somebody.
Right.
My question is, okay, if one of those store owners would have been being, somebody was trying to throw a volatile cocktail or something else, or, going in there to cause serious harm, where would that line draw with them saying, okay, I had a right to try and defend myself, my property, something?
Yeah, well, I used to do this self-defense talks quite often, and what I used to tell people is this: you can't use deadly force to defend property. You can use force to defend property, but not deadly force. Now, brandishing a gun without shooting it sometimes is considered deadly force and sometimes is not considered deadly force. But if, on the other hand, the guy is throwing a Molotov cocktail towards your building and you have people who live in the apartments upstairs, right? Well, then maybe you're not defending your store, rather trying to make sure he doesn't burn the little kids who live in the apartment that you think might be home. So your ability to defend against serious bodily injury or loss of life gives you the right to use deadly force, unless you have a duty to retreat. But if, for instance, you're trying to defend the kids who live in the third floor apartment who you're pretty sure are asleep in their cradle, then they can't retreat, or you wouldn't know if they could retreat or get out. So it would allow you to use deadly force under most states' laws. So that's, again, why we used to always say, after you shoot the guy, don't sit down and give the police a full statement, because if you fall for the trap where they say, so you just wanted to make sure you didn't steal your ho-hos and your ding-dongs and your tobacco that you sell.
My Glenn Beck books.
Right, my Glenn Beck books. You're in trouble. If, on the other hand, you say, so it's better not to say anything, probably, until the light of day comes up. Although our Supreme Court has now said that invoking your right, not specifically invoking your right to remain silent, might be used against you somehow. So you probably should specifically invoke your right to remain silent. But I'm not an attorney, so I wouldn't know.
I just always figured that, if the crap hit the fan and one of those people did something, the law would be on the side of the person that they shot. And I guess I was right.
If nothing, you got to be really careful. Yeah. And using deadly force, listen, here's the other thing. And I hate to say it this way, but let's just think this through logically. If you actually have insurance, right? If you actually have insurance and somebody comes to your store and steals all the stuff in it, right? Then you may have just had your best sales day ever. Think about it. So, maybe preventing the guy from looting and shooting him really isn't in your best interest. On the other hand, if you don't have insurance or you know the insurance is not going to cover things, then worrying about the property probably becomes much more important. But, there's a lot of things to consider in that equation. I remember a golf cart sliding down a hill and almost into a big kind of ravine pond thing at Iron Valley Golf Course. And my buddy, who had been driving it and it started sliding, decided that he was going to try to jump on it and stop it. And he's a big guy, and he managed to get a hold of it, and it was dragging him down the hill, and he barely got a hold of it and stopped it, and he almost died in the process. And when we're all done, I say, hey, and I'm not going to say his name, but I say, what were you, why did you almost killed yourself? He's like, well, dude, those clubs are like $1,000 all together. And he's like, and that golf cart's got to cost, whatever. He's like, I don't have that kind of money. I couldn't afford that. I couldn't afford to pay for that. And I'm like, well, you have a home, right? He's like, yeah. I'm like, your homeowner's insurance would cover that, right? You knew that. He's like, no, I didn't know that. I'm like, if you'd known that, would you have? He's like, absolutely not. I would have just let it roll into the lake.
I'll leave you with this story and let other callers get a chance. I've been with more than one driver who almost ran off the road. Ran off the road like, we were going to be in bad trouble, hit a tree, something. Right. Because they didn't want to hit the bunny. Oh, yeah. Or they didn't want to hit the groundhog. And I'm like, run over the groundhog. I prefer to live.
Yeah. And, they have a few of those mystery accidents, too, like where the 23-year-old girl is off the ravine somewhere in the car with no explanation for why she died, and her phone wasn't being used. And the supposition usually is swerve to avoid deer, middle of the night, swerve to avoid, raccoon, swerve to avoid fill in the blank. Now, deer may cause some damage to your car. Fluffy bunnies, not so much.
I'll regretfully pay the deductible. I'll live another day, and when I get home, I'll be having something hanging and soon be gutting and soon be going in the freezer.
That's true. In fact, I've eaten many roadkills over the years. Last I checked, they taste exactly like the ones you shot with the gun.
If they're steaming, they're good.
That's what they tell me.
I'll let you go get another caller.
Take care. Yeah, I had a friend who used to... roll. By the way, 717-916-5189 if you also want to get on the air tonight. 717-916-5189. So if anybody else wants to join us, feel free. 717-916-5189, and we'll get you up here on the air. Not too much longer left in this show tonight because, well, it's Sunday night. It's big party night, right? No, it's back to work. Back to work. So that's what I'll be doing tomorrow. I did a little work today. A couple hours. Anyhow, long story short, I had this buddy, and he used to go running every morning. And he would go out at 5 a.m. and run on Route 5 in New York. And he would run down the road a couple miles, 3-4 miles out, 3-4 miles back. And every morning, he would be watching for a deer, not a deer, but one that had been hit. And he would pick those things up, and then we'd come back and get them. Caller, you're on the air.
Carl, it's Laura.
Hey, how are you? You got any
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're live on the air. You got any good questions for me?
Well, I just have some comments.
Okay, you go ahead.
Okay. Well, my first comment is about the case in Texas that you're talking about. And I think, in a way, a little part of me feels like, through the whole conversation of what you've said, is maybe they kind of set her up, they watched her, maybe got her intoxicated, and used that.
Or,
Just a thought I had.
Or a crime of opportunity. If you know somebody's a drunk or they're a heavy drinker,
And used it against her.
And let's just talk about this for 1 second. You know, they always say somebody's like 2 or 3 times the legal limit. It's very easy to get over the legal limit for driving. I'm not advising it, but I'm just reminding people that it's a very easy thing to do. It's not like she sharpened 3 knives and, you know, hid them carefully and snuck in someplace to stab somebody. She might have just had a few too many and made a mistake and got behind the wheel of a car, or she was somebody who did it all the time and they knew it, or because completely random, she got caught, and then the governor goes, "Oh man, I was wondering what I was going to do to get rid of her. Well, now she's got a DUI. This will be easy. I'll just call for her resignation." And then she says no because she knows that she's on to him, right, on something,
right?
And then he goes, well, it's okay. I'll just cancel your budget, and then you can't do anything. That's why line item vetoes are tricky. People have historically said, well, the president should have a line item veto. Some states, governors have them. Some states don't. Pennsylvania has them. But the theory is that it gives too much power to the president or the governor. It lets them take the entire budget, which was passed as a unit, and veto items, and then the Congress or the in the case of the state legislatures have to come back and get a supermajority in order to get those line items through, and it creates other kinds of political problems. So anyhow, long story short, there's definitely something rotten in Denmark some way, somehow there. I don't think those charges just fell out of the air. Also, keep in mind it's Texas, and all the politicians in Texas play dirty. So, so I don't believe Rick Perry's any different.
I'm with you on that. My next comment was about, you made a brief remark regarding the towel heads or so forth that are constantly, that should be policed more or checked out more, and happen. But I'm going to make a comment and say that it's actually had to come back the other way. To me, a white American, blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl, okay, at every opportunity, I get searched in the train station when there's clearly people right beside me that are not of this country or not originated, you know, from this country. But they'll pull me out of the crowd every time. It's like irritating at this point.
It's like show and tell. Look,
every time I travel.
Look, see, we search Aryan women too. We search blonde-haired, blue-eyed females. Just so we're not racist. We're not. You become that proof. And what the Israelis tell us, and this is one I'm torn on because I don't think anybody should be a target because of their appearance or their race or anything like that. Because once you open that up, it creates a problem. But on the other hand, the Israelis would tell us that that's part of the problem with our security and why it's not really that good is we don't use all the possible data points to target down our searches. So the reality is there probably are in any group of people, 10 or 12 people you should probably be more suspicious of than everybody else. And those are the ones you should be concentrating on. But we don't do that. We have more like show security, which is kind of what you're experiencing there. Or at the airport with the stuff at the airport where, you know, and I can tell you in my own experience, I've found myself on the airplane with a cigar cutter before. You know, how did that get on the airplane? I'll tell you how. I carried it on.
I was going to say, you probably did.
Because why? Because it just proves that they're only looking for certain things. You know, and what they're looking for really isn't what matters. It's what's on the list to make the soccer moms of the country feel safe at night.
Yeah. Well, I definitely don't feel safe when I'm traveling and I constantly get pulled over to the side to be searched and so forth.
Well, it's an intrusion as well. It's an intrusion of your personal privacy.
It really is. It's first of all, it's irritating. It's time consuming. And furthermore, I just feel as though I'm an example at this point. And it's, 1 out of 10 times I don't get searched.
You're going to have to wear a wig and use dark foundation. It'll be fun.
There you go. And then finally, my last comment is that you said about the girls missing the fluffy bunny rabbits. And excuse me, Carl, but guys do the same thing.
You swear for the fluffy bunny rabbits?
I do, but I the same thing.
I swear to hit the fluffy bunny rabbits.
Oh no, I believe you.
If you can knock one off the bumper just right, with the, the rabbits. It's tough because there's not much left. But and in the summertime not so much. They're a little wormy.
You're bad.
All right. Well, you're going to be my last caller because I'm going to get the hell out of here.
Okay.
All right, Laura. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you for calling. Goodbye.
Bye bye.
All right. I think that's it. I am done. So we'll be back Wednesday. I don't know what day that'll be. The 21st, maybe? 21st? I'll be back Wednesday to discuss all this stuff. Somebody told me my outro music might have like some little snap, crackles, and pops in it. I got to figure that out if that's true or not. All right, you've been listening to Rominger Radio. This is Carl Rominger. I've been your host. I've been having a hell of a great time talking to you guys, as always. Do me a favor and share this show. Just take it, whichever way you're listening to it, and share it on Facebook, Twitter, Google, Snapchat, whatever the hell it is you kids do these days. Share it with as many people as possible, because the more listeners we get, the more time I can devote to the air, okay? 717-916-5189 for the future. It's been Carl Rominger. You've been listening to Rominger Radio. Thank you.